I raised them with every ounce of my soul. I quit my job, sold my grandmother's pearls, worked doubles through pain and exhaustion, all so my twins could have the life I never did. I bandaged every knee, cheered every dream, built college funds from pennies. I thought love like that would last forever. I thought sacrifice earned loyalty. Then, one rainy Thanksgiving, they didn't show. No call, no apology, just silence. The day my children turned their backs, I learned the heartbreaking truth about motherhood. Sometimes the people you give everything to forget to give anything back. But what happens when the woman who gave it all finally chooses herself? This is my story, and it's about to break your heart and maybe heal it too. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and if you had told me at 23 that the greatest love of my life would one day become my deepest wound, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, love felt bulletproof. Back then, I believed in forever the way only a young mother can, fiercely, blindly, completely. It was a humid August evening in 1987 when Leela and Ethan came into the world at St. Mary's Hospital in Oak Park, just west of Chicago. I had been in labor for 22 hours, the kind of labor that makes you question every decision you ever made. Tom paced the hallway in his faded Carhartt jacket, smelling faintly of motor oil and coffee. The nurses kept telling me to breathe, but all I could think about was getting through it so I could finally meet them. When the doctor lifted the first baby, Leela, into the air, she let out a cry that sounded more like indignation than distress. Seconds later, Ethan followed, smaller, quieter, but just as determined. They placed them both on my chest, warm and slippery and impossibly real. Their little chests rose and fell against mine, and I felt something shift inside me forever. It wasn't just my body that changed, it was my entire center of gravity. I looked down at their scrunched red faces, at the dark peach fuzz on their heads, at the way Leela's tiny fist curled around my hospital gown like she was already claiming me. Ethan's eyes, big, dark, searching, locked onto mine for a heartbeat before he closed them again. In that moment, with monitors beeping and Tom leaning over my shoulder whispering, "They're perfect, Ellie," I made the promise that would define the next 40 years of my life. "I'll never let the world hurt you," I whispered so softly only they could hear. "I'll give you everything I never had. Safety, security, a mother who shows up every single day, no matter what." I meant every word. Growing up, I hadn't had that kind of mother. Mine worked double shifts at the diner and came home too tired to talk. My father left when I was 7, and the only thing he left behind was a stack of unpaid bills and a habit of disappointment. I spent my childhood hungry, not just for food, though that too, but for someone to notice me, to care enough to stay. I swore my kids would never know that emptiness. So I built them a world. I quit my nursing job at the county hospital the week after the twins were born. The paycheck was decent, the benefits solid, but the 12-hour shifts meant missing back time, missing first smiles, missing the way their eyes lit up when I walked through the door. I couldn't do it. Tom made enough at the Ford plant in Cicero to cover the rent on our small 2-bedroom apartment above the hardware store. We didn't need much. We had each other. Those early years blur together in a haze of joy and exhaustion. Diaper changes at 3 a.m., endless loads of laundry that smelled like baby powder and spit up, the sweet weight of a sleeping infant against my shoulder while I swayed in the rocking chair my mother-in-law had given us. I learned to function on 4 hours of sleep. I learned how to breastfeed while folding clothes one-handed. I learned that love isn't a feeling, it's 1,000 small, repetitive actions done without complaint. Tom was a good man in the beginning. He worked the line, came home greasy and tired, kissed the babies' heads before collapsing on the couch. We dreamed together. A house with a yard, a swing set, maybe a dog someday. He called me Ellie Girl and told me I was beautiful even when my hair was in a messy bun and there were Cheerios stuck to my shirt. I believed him. By the time the twins were 2, we had scraped together enough for a down payment on a modest ranch house in Naperville. It needed work, peeling paint, cracked linoleum, a backyard full of weeds, but it was ours. I sold my grandmother's pearl necklace, the only nice thing I'd ever owned, to make the numbers work. Tom promised it was temporary. He said, "We'll get you a new one someday," kissing my forehead. I smiled and nodded, already picturing the twins running through the grass, safe and happy. I threw myself into making that house a home. I painted walls the color of buttercream, hung curtains I sewed myself on a borrowed machine, planted tulips along the walkway, even though I killed half of them the first winter. Every Saturday morning, I baked banana bread while the twins helped by smearing batter on the cabinets. Every scraped knee got kissed, every nightmare got rocked away. I volunteered in their preschool classroom, read every bedtime story with funny voices, kept a scrapbook so thick it wouldn't close. I told myself the sacrifices were nothing. Missing girls' nights with old coworkers, worth it. Giving up weekend hikes and late-night movies, no contest. My dreams of going back to school for my RN license, maybe becoming a midwife, faded into the background like an old radio station. The kids were my dream now. Tom started drinking more after the plant laid off half the second shift. He said it was just to unwind. I believed him because I wanted to. The fights grew louder, the silences colder. One night, he didn't come home until dawn, reeking of whiskey and regret. I forgave him. Mothers forgive. That's what we do. When the twins were 5, I found the divorce papers in his toolbox, hidden under socket wrenches like a dirty secret. I sat on the garage floor and cried until the concrete felt warm against my skin. Then I wiped my face, went inside, and told Leela and Ethan that Daddy had to work far away for a while. They were too young to understand abandonment. I made sure they never had to. From that day forward, it was just the 3 of us. I went back to night shifts at the hospital to keep the house. I learned to juggle school drop-offs, soccer practices, ballet recitals, and IV drips all in the same 24 hours. My hands smelled of antiseptic and Play-Doh. My heart smelled of fear. Fear that I wasn't enough. Fear that they'd feel the absence I'd tried so hard to hide. But every night when I tucked them in and kissed their foreheads, I whispered the same promise I'd made in that hospital room. I'll never let the world hurt you. I kept that promise for decades. I bandaged, I cheered, I sacrificed. I gave up sleep, savings, dreams, pieces of myself I didn't even know I was losing. I thought love like that earned loyalty in return. I thought sacrifice built unbreakable bonds. I was wrong. The years between 5 and 18 passed like pages in a scrapbook I couldn't stop filling. Every snapshot was carefully arranged. First lost tooth under the pillow, first bike with training wheels wobbling down the driveway, first school play where Ethan played a tree and Lila was the narrator who forgot her lines but improvised so beautifully the audience clapped anyway. I kept every program, every report card, every macaroni necklace. The house in Naperville became a living museum of their childhoods. After Tom left, the mortgage felt like a monthly mountain I had to climb alone. The plant closure in '08 hit hard. Half the neighborhood was suddenly quiet, driveways empty of pickup trucks. I went back to nursing full-time, nights mostly, because the pay differential let me be home for school drop-offs and soccer practices. I'd stumble in at 7 a.m., still smelling like hospital antiseptic, brew coffee, pack lunches, and kiss 2 sleepyheads before they ran for the bus. Then I'd collapse for 4 hours before the afternoon whirlwind began. Lila wanted ballet, not just any ballet, Miss Elena's Academy downtown, the one with the mirrored walls and the real point shoes that cost a small fortune. I took an extra shift every Thursday so I could pay for the lessons and the leotard and the pink tights with the little bows. On recital nights, I sat in the 3rd row, camera in hand, heart in my throat as she floated across the stage like she weighed nothing. She was 12 the first time she got flowers on stage, pink roses I'd bought from the grocery store and tied with a ribbon I'd saved from Christmas. She hugged me so tight the thorns pricked my arm. I didn't care. That hug was worth every overtime hour. Ethan wanted baseball. Not t-ball, not coach pitch, real little league with tryouts and travel teams. He had the arm, the focus, the quiet determination that reminded me of my father before the leaving. I signed him up, bought the glove that cost more than a week's groceries, drove him to practices in rain so heavy the windshield wipers couldn't keep up. I sat on metal bleachers with a thermos of coffee that went cold, cheering until my voice cracked when he struck out the side in the championship game. The team trophy sat on our mantle for years, next to Lila's framed certificate from the county art fair. I learned to stretch a dollar until it screamed. Generic cereal instead of name brand, thrift store jeans hemmed to fit growing legs, birthday parties in the backyard with homemade cake and a slip and slide instead of Chuck E. Cheese. I told them it was more fun that way. They believed me because I believed it. The house itself became my third child. I painted the kitchen cabinets sage green when the twins were 8 because Lila said the old yellow made her sad. I planted a vegetable garden in the backyard, tomatoes, zucchini, green beans, because fresh food was cheaper and because I wanted them to know where dinner came from. Summers smelled like cut grass and sunscreen and the faint chlorine from the community pool where I worked as a lifeguard on weekends for extra cash. Tom sent sporadic child support checks that arrived late and light. I never told the kids. Instead, I opened savings accounts in their names at the credit union downtown. Every birthday check from my aunt in Wisconsin, every holiday bonus from the hospital, every garage sale dollar, I tucked it away. College funds. I called them their future money. They rolled their eyes when I said it, but they knew I meant it. High school brought new pressures. Lila discovered boys, then discovered heartbreak at 16 when her first serious boyfriend dumped her for a cheerleader. She cried in my lap for hours while I stroked her hair and whispered that she was enough, always enough. Ethan buried himself in AP Calculus and Robotics Club, staying up until 2 a.m. coding projects I didn't understand but applauded anyway. I drove them to college fairs, proofread essays, stayed up late helping Ethan build a solar-powered car for the science fair. When he won 3rd place at regionals, I framed the ribbon next to his baby picture. I dated exactly twice in those years. Both times ended quickly. The first man, a kind ER doctor named Mark, said he admired how devoted I was to my kids. Then he said he wasn't ready to be a stepdad. The second, a quiet accountant named Paul, lasted 3 months before he admitted he wanted someone with less baggage. I laughed it off in front of them, but that night I cried in the shower so the water would drown the sound. I told myself it didn't matter. I had my twins. They were my life. By the time they were seniors, the house felt smaller, louder, with college brochures and prom dresses and part-time job schedules. Lila got into Northwestern, early decision, partial scholarship. I sat on the porch swing the night the acceptance email came, reading it over and over, while tears blurred the screen. Ethan chose the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, solid engineering program, in-state tuition I could almost afford. I started a second job doing private duty nursing on weekends to cover the gaps. Graduation day was perfect blue sky June. I wore a sundress I'd bought on clearance and cried through both speeches. Afterwards, we took pictures in front of the old oak tree in the front yard, Lila in her cap and gown hugging me, Ethan standing tall with his arm around my shoulders. I looked at those photos later and thought, this is it. This is what I built. 2 kids ready to fly because I held the nest steady. I didn't know then that holding the nest steady for so long would leave my own wings clipped. I didn't know the day would come when they'd look back and see only what they wanted to see. My mistakes, my absences, the nights I was too tired to listen the way they needed. I didn't know loyalty could be rewritten, that sacrifice could be reframed as obligation. But in those building years, I believed it all. I believed love was a deposit you made every day, and someday the interest would come due, in kindness, in phone calls, in Thanksgivings around the same table. I was wrong about the interest rate, but God, I built something beautiful while it lasted. The divorce was final by the time the twins turned 6, but the real work of holding everything together started the morning after the judge's gavel fell. I woke up in the same bed I'd shared with Tom for 12 years, except now the other side was cold and the closet half empty. I stared at the ceiling for a long minute, listening to the house breathe, creaky floorboards settling, the furnace kicking on downstairs. Then I got up, brushed my teeth, and started the day like any other. Because that's what single mothers do. We don't get the luxury of falling apart. The first year was survival mode. I sold the minivan we couldn't afford anymore and bought a used Honda Civic with 120,000 miles and a dented fender. I moved the twins into one bedroom so I could rent out the second one on Airbnb to cover the mortgage gap. Strangers slept in what used to be our guest room. I washed sheets at midnight and smiled when they left 5-star reviews about the cozy family home. I told the kids it was an adventure. They believed me because 6-year-olds still trust their mothers implicitly. Money became a constant math problem. Groceries on a spreadsheet, gas calculated to the mile. I clipped coupons like it was a full-time job, shopped the day-old bakery rack, learned to make spaghetti stretch for 3 nights. The kids never went hungry, but I did, quietly so they wouldn't notice. I'd eat the crusts they left on their plates, or the last spoonful of mac and cheese while they watched cartoons. It wasn't noble, it was necessary. School mornings were military precision. Alarm at 5:45, shower while the coffee brewed, wake the twins gently, help them into clothes I'd laid out the night before, breakfast, oatmeal most days, eggs when we could splurge. Bus stop at 7:20 sharp. Then I'd drive to the hospital for the 8 a.m. shift, arriving with wet hair and a thermos of black coffee. Nights were worse. Home by 8 p.m. if I was lucky, dinner, homework, baths, bedtime stories, lights out by 9:30, then laundry, bills, lesson plans for the next day. Sleep came in snatches, 4 hours if I was fortunate. Lila started having nightmares after Tom stopped calling. She'd wake up crying, "Where's Daddy?" I'd crawl into her bed, hold her small, shaking body, and whisper lies that felt like mercy. "He's working far away, sweetheart. He loves you so much. He just can't be here right now." She'd fall back asleep against my chest, trusting. Ethan never asked. He just got quieter, more watchful. He'd sit at the kitchen table doing math homework while I paid bills, glancing up every few minutes like he was making sure I was still there. I became the mom who said yes. Yes to field trips even when it meant skipping a utility payment and calling to beg for an extension. Yes to sleepovers so they could feel normal. Yes to the science fair that required a volcano made of baking soda and vinegar and red food coloring that exploded all over the kitchen at 11 p.m. Yes to the school musical, even though the costume needed sequins I couldn't afford. I bought a cheap pack at Walmart and sewed them on by hand while the twins slept. By middle school, the cracks were showing. Lila got teased for her thrift store backpack. Ethan came home with a split lip after defending a kid from bullies. I sat them down one night after dinner and told them the truth in the gentlest way I could. We don't have as much money as some families, but we have each other, and that's worth more than anything. They nodded solemnly. I prayed they believed it. High school brought bigger expenses and bigger emotions. Lila wanted to join the art club. Supplies weren't cheap. I took on private duty cases, sitting with elderly patients overnight so their families could sleep. I'd come home smelling like Bengay and hospital linens, count the cash tips in the kitchen at dawn, and drive straight to the art supply store. Ethan needed a graphing calculator for AP classes. I sold my wedding ring on Craigslist to buy it. When he hugged me and said, "Thanks, Mom, you're the best," I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. College applications loomed like storm clouds. Lila's portfolio for Northwestern was stunning. Charcoal sketches of city skylines, watercolor portraits of me reading to them when they were little. Ethan's essays were quiet and brilliant, full of code and dreams of building things that mattered. I drove them to campus tours, sat in the car while they walked around with tour guides, and cried silently when they weren't looking. Northwestern accepted Lila with a merit scholarship that covered half. UIUC offered Ethan in-state tuition and a small engineering grant. The rest was on me. I doubled down. Night shifts became doubles when I could get them. I stopped buying anything for myself. No new clothes, no haircuts at the salon, no nights out. My wardrobe was the same 5 pairs of scrubs rotated weekly. My hair went gray at the temples. I stopped dyeing it. Who had time? The day Lila got her acceptance letter, I opened a bottle of cheap champagne I'd been saving and toasted them both in the kitchen. "To my brilliant kids," I said, voice cracking. "You did it." They laughed and hugged me, champagne fizzing on their lips. Ethan whispered, "We couldn't have done it without you, Mom." I held on to those words like a life raft. I didn't tell them how close we'd come to losing the house twice. I didn't tell them about the collection calls I answered in the hospital parking lot between shifts. I didn't tell them I'd started skipping doctor appointments for myself because the copay was too high. I just kept holding it together, one shift, one payment, one bedtime story at a time. Because that's what mothers do when the world tries to pull everything apart. We become the glue. We become the gravity. We become the promise kept, even when it costs us everything we have left. And for a long time, it felt like enough. Until it wasn't. The day Lila moved out for good, I stood in the driveway watching her U-Haul disappear around the corner of Maple Street, taillights fading into the late afternoon haze. She'd waved once, blown a kiss through the open window, and shouted, "Love you, Mom. I'll call when I get there." Ethan had already left 2 weeks earlier for San Francisco, plane ticket I'd paid for with the last of the college savings, and his goodbye had been quieter, a long hug, a promise to text when he landed, and then he was gone. I walked back inside the house that suddenly felt cavernous. The silence hit like a physical thing. No music blasting from Lila's room, no refrigerator door opening and closing every 10 minutes, no footsteps thundering down the stairs at 2 a.m. because someone forgot to set an alarm. Just the hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock in the kitchen, and the faint creak of floorboards settling under no one's weight. I was 58, retired from the hospital after 32 years, back issues, burned out knees, and a pension that covered the basics if I was careful. The house in Naperville, the one I'd fought tooth and nail to keep through layoffs and lean years, now belonged only to me. Every room echoed with absence. At first, I tried to fill the quiet the way people do. I turned on the television just to hear voices. I played old CDs, Fleetwood Mac, Norah Jones, anything that used to make the kids groan when I sang along. I cleaned obsessively, scrubbed baseboards I hadn't touched in years, organized the pantry by expiration date, rearranged the bookshelves alphabetically, anything to keep moving. The kids called, of course, at first. Lila phoned every Sunday night from her tiny studio in Lincoln Park. She'd talk fast about her new job at the marketing firm, the cute barista at the coffee shop downstairs, how Chicago felt electric compared to Naperville. I listened, asked questions, laughed at the right moments. Ethan texted more than he called. Quick updates. Landed safely, apartment's small but cool. Startup life is insane. I saved every message like they were love letters. But the calls thinned. Sundays became every other week, then once a month. Then, "I'll call you next week, promise," followed by radio silence. I told myself they were busy, building careers, making friends, falling in love. That's what 20-somethings do. I remembered being that age, scrambling, dreaming, forgetting to call home because the world felt so big and urgent. I started small rituals to mark time. Monday mornings, I drove to the farmer's market downtown and bought flowers, gerbera daisies mostly, bright and cheap. I put them in the blue vase on the kitchen table and talked to them while I made coffee. Lila would love these, I'd say out loud. Ethan probably would say they're a waste of money. Then I'd laugh at myself for talking to flowers. I joined the garden club at the community center. We met every Wednesday in the basement room that smelled like damp concrete and old coffee. There were 8 of us, mostly widows and divorcees my age or older. We swapped cuttings, complained about Japanese beetles, and drank weak decaf. They became my people. Not friends exactly, not the kind who know your children's middle names, but companions in the quiet war against loneliness. I volunteered at the animal shelter 3 mornings a week, walking dogs, cleaning cages, holding kittens that purred against my chest. The animals didn't ask why my kids didn't visit, they just leaned into my hand and let me love them without expectation. I named one of the older labs after Ethan, big brown eyes, quiet dignity. When he got adopted, I cried in the parking lot like I'd lost my son all over again. Book club came next. We read mostly women's fiction, stories about mothers and daughters, second chances, quiet rebellions. I cried at every meeting. The other women patted my hand and said things like, "They'll come around," and "You did your best." I smiled and nodded, but inside I wondered if doing your best was ever enough when the people you did it for didn't seem to notice. Christmas was the hardest. The first one alone I decorated anyway. Tree in the living room, lights strung across the mantel, stockings hung even though no one would fill them. I cooked the full meal: turkey, stuffing, green bean casserole, pumpkin pie from scratch. I set 3 places at the table, lit candles, and played Bing Crosby. Then I sat there staring at the empty chairs until the food went cold. I wrapped the leftovers and dropped them at the shelter the next day. The dogs didn't care that it was Christmas dinner. The second Christmas, I didn't decorate. I bought a small artificial tree from Target, 2 feet tall, pre-lit, and set it on the coffee table. No ornaments, no lights beyond the ones built in. I ordered Chinese takeout and watched It's a Wonderful Life, alone on the couch, tissues in one hand, egg roll in the other. They promised to visit that year. Lila said she'd fly in with her new boyfriend. Ethan said he'd try to make it work around his startup schedule. Christmas Eve came, no knock at the door, no phone call saying we're delayed, just a text from Lila at 8 p.m. Flight got canceled, blizzard in Chicago, sorry mom, love you. Ethan's message arrived an hour later, stuck in meetings through New Year's, next time, promise. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Then I turned off the tree lights, poured a glass of the cheap red wine I kept for special occasions, and sat in the dark living room listening to the wind rattle the windows. That was the night I finally admitted it to myself. The nest wasn't just empty, it was abandoned. I didn't blame them, not out loud, not yet. They were young, the world was pulling them in 1,000 directions. I had raised them to fly, hadn't I? To chase dreams, to build lives bigger than the one I'd given them. So I swallowed the hurt like I'd swallowed so many things over the years. I told myself it was temporary. They'd come back when things settled. They'd remember the woman who'd driven through blizzards for recitals, who'd stayed up nights sewing costumes, who believed in them when no one else did. But deep down, in the quiet hours when the house creaked and the clock ticked too loudly, a small, cold truth began to take root. Maybe flying away meant leaving the nest behind forever. And maybe the woman who built that nest would have to learn to live in it alone. The shift was so gradual, I almost missed it, like the way daylight fades in late autumn. 1 minute bright, the next dim, and you can't pinpoint the exact second the color drains from the sky. But looking back, the first real crack appeared the spring Leela turned 28. She called on a Thursday evening in April. I was in the kitchen chopping onions for chili, comfort food for one, when my phone lit up with her name. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and answered with a smile already in my voice. "Mom, guess what?" I set the knife down. "Tell me everything." "We're getting married. James proposed last weekend in Napa. Small wedding, just family and a few friends. Late summer. Isn't that exciting?" My heart did a funny little flip, joy mixed with something sharper I couldn't name yet. "Leela, honey, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. When do I get to meet him properly? And the wedding, do you need help with anything? Venue deposits, flowers, the dress?" She laughed, light and quick. "We're good, Mom. James's parents are covering most of it. We want it intimate, no big fuss. You don't have to worry about paying for anything." I leaned against the counter, the onion smells stinging my eyes more than usual. "I'm not worried, I just want to help. It's my daughter's wedding." "I know, but we've got it handled, really. I'll send you the save the date when we finalize the date." We talked for another 10 minutes about the vineyard, the menu, how James's family owned a little winery up there. I asked if she needed me to come out early, maybe help with invitations or fittings. She said no, they were keeping it simple. When we hung up, the kitchen felt colder. A few weeks later, my hip started giving me real trouble. The pain had been creeping for years. Too many double shifts carrying trays, too many nights on my feet in the OR, but now it woke me at night. The doctor ordered an MRI, then scheduled the replacement for June. I mentioned it casually in our next call. "Leela, just a heads up, I'm having hip surgery next month. Nothing major, but I'll be down for a bit." Silence on her end, then, "Oh wow, that's big. Are you okay?" "I'll be fine. Just wanted you to know in case you tried to call and I didn't pick up right away. Send me the date. I'll make sure to check in." She didn't ask for details, didn't offer to fly in, didn't say she'd help with recovery. I told myself she was busy planning a wedding. I told myself it was fine. The surgery went smoothly. I spent 3 days in the hospital, then came home to a quiet condo I'd moved into the year before. Smaller, one level, easier on the joints. Neighbors brought casseroles, the garden club ladies set up a meal train. I crutched around the living room, grateful for the help, but every time the phone stayed silent for more than a day, the ache in my chest matched the one in my hip. Ethan texted the day after I got home. Heard about the surgery. Hope you're feeling better soon. 3 emojis. No call, no, how are you managing? I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then typed back, thanks, sweetheart. Doing okay. Love you. He hearted the reply. That was it. Summer arrived. Leela posted engagement photos on Instagram, golden hour shots in a vineyard, her in a flowing white sundress, James in linen, both of them laughing with the sun behind them. She looked radiant. I scrolled through the carousel twice, heart swelling, then noticed something. Not one photo included me. Not even a mention in the caption, just so excited to marry my best friend, ring, heart. Hashtag engaged, hashtag Napa Valley. I liked the post anyway, commented, beautiful, so happy for you both. She liked my comment, no reply. My birthday came in September. I turned 65. The garden club threw me a small tea at the community center, finger sandwiches, scones, too much chamomile. I blew out a single candle on a cupcake and smiled for the photos. My phone stayed quiet all day. Around 8 p.m., a group text popped up from both kids. Leela, happy birthday, Mom. Hope you're having a great day. Cake. Ethan, yeah, happy birthday. Balloons. No card in the mail, no flowers, no call. Just 11 words between them and a couple of emojis. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to type, thank you, I miss you both. Can we talk soon? But I didn't. I wrote, thank you, loves. It was nice. Heart. Then I turned off the lights, took my pain meds, and went to bed early. The cracks kept spreading, thin and hairline at first, then wider. Leela's wedding came and went. She live-streamed a few minutes on Instagram stories, the ceremony under a wooden arch draped in greenery, vows exchanged with tears and laughter. I watched from my couch, alone, tissue in hand. She never invited me to attend in person. It's so small, Mom, she said when I asked. We didn't want to make it complicated. I understood, or told myself I did. After the honeymoon, posts kept coming, new apartment tours, James cooking dinner, weekend getaways. Ethan announced a promotion on LinkedIn, senior engineer at his startup. He tagged the company, his team, even a few college friends. No tag for me. I congratulated him in a private message. He replied 2 days later, thanks, Mom. Thanksgiving approached. I asked if they'd come home. Leela said maybe. Ethan said he'd try. Neither committed. I cooked anyway, a small turkey, just in case. It sat in the fridge for days afterwards. The hurt wasn't loud yet. It was a low hum, like background noise you learn to live with. I kept telling myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They build their own lives. They don't need their mother hovering. But every unanswered call, every one-word text, every milestone celebrated without me chipped away at something deeper. I started noticing the pattern. I was the safety net, not the celebration, the emergency contact, not the first person they wanted to share good news with. And somewhere in those quiet evenings, scrolling through their perfectly curated feeds, while my own life stayed small and still, I began to wonder if all the years of giving had taught them how to take, without ever learning how to give back. The first cracks weren't dramatic. They were subtle, polite, almost invisible, but they were there. And once a foundation starts to fissure, it's only a matter of time before the whole structure feels the strain. It wasn't a dramatic explosion. No screaming match over the phone, no slammed doors, no final ultimatum that echoed through the years. The breaking point arrived quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday in mid-October, the kind of gray, drizzling day that makes the Midwest feel like it's holding its breath before winter. I was sitting at the small kitchen table in my condo, the one I'd bought after downsizing because stairs became too much and the old house felt like a museum of memories I couldn't afford to heat. A stack of mail lay in front of me, mostly bills, a few catalogs I never ordered, and one thick envelope from the condo association. I opened it last. The letter was polite but firm. 3 months of unpaid HOA fees, late notices ignored, final warning before lien proceedings. The amount wasn't enormous, $1,800, but after the hip replacement, the physical therapy copays, the deductible that insurance refused to cover fully, and the simple fact that my pension and Social Security barely stretched to groceries and utilities, it might as well have been $10,000. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. My first instinct was to call the kids, not out of habit exactly, but out of muscle memory. For decades, when things got tight, I'd handled it alone. But this time, the math didn't work, no matter how many ways I rearranged it. I needed help, just this once. I dialed Leela first, straight to voicemail. Her cheerful greeting, "Hey, it's Leela. Leave a message and I'll get back to you when I'm not buried in emails," felt like a slap. I hung up without speaking. Ethan answered on the third ring. His voice sounded distracted, like he was half listening while typing. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" I tried to keep it light. "Hey, sweetheart, just running into a little financial snag with the condo fees. Medical bills hit harder than I expected. I hate to ask, but could you spot me a couple hundred until next month? Or even half. I'll pay it back quick." A pause. Longer than it should have been. Yeah, about that." Another pause. I could hear him shift in his chair, maybe glance at a screen. "We're actually pretty tight right now. Leela's letting wiped us out more than we thought. Venue, photographer, that whole Napa thing. And my startup just burned through another round of seed money trying to hit the next milestone. Payroll's brutal. I mean, I can maybe scrape together 100, but..." His voice trailed off like he expected me to fill in the blank, to say, "Oh, never mind, I'll figure it out." I didn't. "I already sold everything I could sell for you two," I said quietly. The words came out before I could stop them. The house, Grandma's pearls, my wedding ring, the extra shifts, the nights I didn't sleep. I sold pieces of myself so you wouldn't have to worry about money. And now? Silence stretched across the line. Not awkward silence, heavy silence. "Mom," he said, softer, almost gentle, "I get it. You did a lot. We know that. But we're building something here too. It's not like we're throwing money away. We're investing in the future. You always told us to think long term." I closed my eyes. "I told you that so you could have security, not so I'd end up with collection notices at 65. Look, we'll figure it out later, okay? Maybe after the next funding round, or when Leela's maternity leave pay kicks in. She's due in February. Just hold off on the fees if you can. Talk to the association. They usually work with people." Hold off, talk to them, figure it out later. The same phrases I'd used on creditors when the twins were little. The same promises I'd made to myself in the dark. "Okay," I said. My voice sounded small. "I love you, Mom. Gotta jump. Meeting in 5. We'll talk soon." The call ended. I sat there, holding the phone until it beeped that the call had disconnected. Then I set it down carefully, like it might break. Across the room, on the narrow bookshelf that doubled as a display case, hung the gallery wall I'd built over decades. Baby pictures in silver frames, graduation caps, Leela's charcoal sketch of me reading Goodnight Moon, Ethan's first-place robotics trophy from 8th grade. A photo from their high school prom, Leela and Teal, Ethan in a rented tux, both grinning like the world was theirs. I looked at those faces, so young, so full of promise, and felt something crack wide open inside my chest. Not anger, exactly. Not yet. Just a deep, bone-tired recognition. I had given them everything. My 20s, my 30s, most of my 40s. Sleep, savings, dreams deferred so theirs could launch. I told myself it was noble, sacrificial, the definition of motherhood. But standing there in the quiet condo with rain tapping the window like impatient fingers, I saw it clearly for the first time. I had raised two adults who believed the world owed them ease because I had made everything easy for them. They hadn't learned gratitude because I'd never required it. They hadn't learned reciprocity because I'd never modeled it for asking. I walked to the wall and lifted one frame, the hospital photo from the day they were born, my 23-year-old self, exhausted and euphoric, cradling two tiny bundles. I'd whispered a promise into their downy hair. I'll protect you from the world. I'd kept that promise so well, they never learned the world could bite back. And now, when the world was biting me, they were too busy to notice. I set the frame down gently, then I picked up the HOA letter, opened my laptop, and started searching for part-time remote nursing consulting gigs. Anything. Something. Because waiting for later was no longer an option. That Tuesday in October didn't end with fireworks or tears that lasted all night. It ended with me making a cup of tea, sitting back down at the table, and beginning to calculate how many extra hours I could work before my body gave out completely. The breaking point wasn't loud. It was the moment I stopped expecting them to catch me when I fell, and started catching myself instead.
Thanksgiving had always been sacred in our house, even after the divorce, even after the kids left for college, even after the empty nest swallowed the noise. I kept the tradition alive like a flame I refused to let die. The turkey brined for 2 days in the fridge, the stuffing made from my mother's recipe, sage, celery, day-old bread torn by hand. Cranberry sauce simmered on the stove until the whole condo smelled like autumn and forgiveness. Pumpkin pie with extra cinnamon because Ethan liked it that way. Green bean casserole with the crispy fried onions on top because Lila swore it wasn't Thanksgiving without them. This year, I started early. The Wednesday before, I drove to the Jewel Osco at 7 a.m. when the shelves were still full and the crowds hadn't descended. I bought a 14-pound bird even though it was just me. Maybe leftovers would last a week. I bought the good butter, real cream for the mashed potatoes, fresh rosemary for the gravy. I told myself it was preparation, not hope, but deep down, I was hoping. They'd both said they'd try to come. Lila texted first, 10 days out. James's family is doing a big thing in Napa again, but I might fly in Thursday night. Depends on work. I replied immediately, I'll keep your room ready. Can't wait to see you. No answer for 3 days. Then, actually, flights are insane. Might have to skip. Sorry. Ethan was vaguer. A phone call 2 weeks before. Voice rushed, like always. Startups launching the beta that week. Investors flying in from New York. If I can wrap early, I'll book a red-eye Wednesday. Promise I'll try, Mom. I didn't push. I never pushed anymore. I just said, I'll set an extra plate just in case. Love you. Thursday morning dawned cold and bright. I woke at 5:30 like I used to when they were little, put the turkey in the oven low and slow, peeled potatoes while the house filled with that warm, familiar smell. I set the table for 3, cloth napkins folded into swans the way Lila taught me years ago, the good china I'd bought at a garage sale when they were in high school, candles in the pumpkin-shaped holders Ethan made in 3rd grade. I even put out the tiny turkey-shaped salt and pepper shakers we'd used since they were toddlers. By noon, the bird was golden, the sides ready to reheat, the pie cooling on the rack. I showered, put on the burgundy sweater dress I'd bought on clearance last year, something festive, something that said I was still trying. I lit the candles at 1:30, sat down at 2 p.m. sharp, phone face up on the table in case they texted they were running late. 2:03 p.m. A message from Lila. Flight delayed out of SFO. Weather in Chicago is a mess, probably not making it tonight. Maybe next year. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom. Eat some pie for me. I stared at the words until they swam. Next year, the phrase had become a refrain. 2:17 p.m. Ethan. Work emergency blew up. Server crash right before demo. Investors freaking out. Stuck here through the weekend. Really sorry, Mom. Call you later? Happy Turkey Day. No emojis this time. Just words on a screen. I sat there in the candlelight, turkey steaming on its platter, Gravy boat full, 3 plates empty, except for the one in front of me. The silence pressed in so hard it hurt my ears. I picked up the carving knife, hands shaking, and sliced a single piece of breast meat, put it on my plate, added a spoonful of stuffing, a dollop of cranberry, a green bean or two. I stared at the food like it belonged to someone else. Then the tears came. Not loud sobs, quiet ones that slipped down my cheeks and dripped onto the napkin in my lap. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall while I sat perfectly still, listening to the tick of the wall clock and the faint sizzle of the turkey settling in its juices. This was the day they turned their backs. Not with cruelty, not with anger, with absence, with excuses that sounded reasonable on paper, but felt like abandonment in the marrow of my bones. They hadn't screamed or accused or rejected me outright. They'd simply chosen everything else over me, over the woman who'd carried them, raised them, fed them, clothed them, cheered them, paid for them, prayed for them. I thought of the hospital room 38 years earlier, twins on my chest, tiny fists curled, my whispered vow. I thought of the nights I'd worked doubles while they slept, the Christmases I'd stretched to make magical, the college funds I'd built penny by penny. I thought of the hip surgery I'd recovered from alone, the birthday with no card, the wedding I'd watched on a phone screen. And I realized, sitting there at that candlelit table with cold mashed potatoes and a bird big enough for a family that no longer showed up, sacrifice isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's just loss dressed up as love. Loyalty, I learned that day, isn't automatic. It isn't owed. It's built. Or it isn't. And mine had been given freely for decades, but theirs had never been required to grow in return. I cried until the candles burned low and wax pooled on the tablecloth. Then I stood up slowly, like an old woman in someone else's body. I blew out the flames one by one, wrapped the turkey in foil, packed the sides into Tupperware, carried everything to the car in 2 trips, my hip aching the whole way. I drove to the homeless shelter downtown, the one where I'd volunteered for years. The director, Maria, met me at the back door, even though it was after hours. "Eleanor, you okay?" I handed her the bags. Too much food for one, thought maybe. She looked at my face, saw the red eyes, the streaked mascara, didn't ask questions, just took the bags and pulled me into a hug that smelled of coffee and laundry soap. "Sit for a minute," she said. "I'll make tea." I sat in the break room while she boiled water. When she came back with 2 mugs, I told her everything. Not the polished version, the raw one. The one where I admitted I'd given until there was nothing left, and they still walked away. Maria listened. Then she said the simplest thing. "You didn't fail them, Eleanor. You succeeded so well, they think the world will always catch them. Now they have to learn it won't, and you have to learn you don't have to keep catching for them." I drove home in the dark, streets empty, holiday lights twinkling on houses full of families. My condo was quiet when I walked in. No smells of dinner, no candles, just the faint scent of sage lingering like a ghost. I didn't clean up the table that night. I left it set for 3, because something in me had finally shifted. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I wasn't going to wait anymore. The day they turned their backs wasn't the end of my love for them. It was the beginning of something else. The beginning of loving myself enough to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even bandage the wound. After that empty Thanksgiving, something inside me finally snapped. Not with rage, but with clarity. I didn't scream or throw things. I simply stopped reaching first. No more Sunday morning texts asking how their week went. No more care packages of homemade cookies shipped to San Francisco and Chicago. No more scrolling their Instagram feeds late at night, liking every post like a ghost cheering from the shadows. I went silent, not out of spite, out of self-preservation. The quiet was deafening at first. My phone, which used to buzz with their lives, stayed still for days at a time. I filled the hours instead with small, deliberate acts of living for myself. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center.
Tuesday evenings, 6 weeks. I bought real brushes, not the cheap kid ones I'd used when the twins were little. I painted sunsets over Lake Michigan, clumsy at first, then bolder. The instructor, a retired art teacher named Ruth, told me my colors had emotion. I laughed and said they'd been bottled up too long. I started walking every morning around the neighborhood loop, 3 miles if my hip allowed. I listened to podcasts about women starting over, about boundaries, about grief that doesn't look like grief because no one died. I cried sometimes on those walks, tears freezing on my cheeks in the November wind. But I kept moving. Motion became medicine. Months passed like pages turning slowly. Christmas came again. I didn't decorate. I bought myself a poinsettia from the grocery store and placed it on the kitchen windowsill where it caught the weak winter sun. I volunteered at the shelter on Christmas Day, serving turkey dinner to people who had nowhere else to go. Their gratitude was simple, direct. No promises of next year, just thank you and eye contact that lasted. I came home tired, but full in a way I hadn't felt in years. Lila's social media kept rolling like nothing had changed. Engagement photos gave way to wedding photos, her in ivory lace under Napa vines, James beaming beside her. Then honeymoon shots in Santorini, white buildings, blue domes, sun-kissed selfies. No tag for me, no private message saying wish you were here. I stopped checking daily. Eventually, I stopped checking at all. Ethan announced his startup had closed a Series A, $2 million in funding. LinkedIn lit up with congratulations from colleagues, investors, college buddies. His post included a team photo in a sleek San Francisco office, everyone in hoodies and wide grins. No mention of the mother who'd driven him to robotics competitions at dawn, who'd proofread his college essays until her eyes burned, who'd sold her grandmother's pearls so he could afford that first graphing calculator. I read the post once, then I closed the app and deleted the shortcut from my home screen. One rainy February evening, my phone rang. Lila's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. "Mom?" Her voice sounded smaller than usual. "Hey, hey." A pause. "You haven't called in a while." "I know." Another pause. "We're having a baby shower in April in Chicago. James's mom is throwing it, but I thought maybe you'd want to come. It's a girl. We're naming her after Grandma, Evelyn Rose." My first grandchild. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of joy, then ache, then something harder underneath. "That's wonderful, Lila. Congratulations. You'll come, right? I mean, it's family." I looked out the window at the rain streaking the glass. "I need some time to think about it." She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Time? Mom, it's my baby shower, your granddaughter. After everything we've been through, after everything you've done for us, you're gonna make me beg?" "After everything I've done," I repeated softly. The words tasted metallic. "Yes, you raised us, you sacrificed, you were always there. And now, when I need you, when you need me," I cut in, calm but firm, "you call. When you don't, I don't hear from you. That's not a relationship, Lila. That's a transaction." Silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she exploded. "You're being selfish. We're starting our own family here. We're busy. We're building something. You can't just punish us because we're not at your beck and call every week. After all we've done?" "All you've done?" I asked quietly. She faltered. "You know what I mean. We love you. We appreciate you. Life happens." "Life happened to me too," I said, "for 40 years, and I kept showing up. Now I'm choosing to show up for myself." She started crying then, big, angry sobs. "So that's it? You're abandoning us because we didn't come for Thanksgiving? Because we're not perfect?" "I'm not abandoning anyone," I told her. "I'm setting a boundary. You're welcome to cross it when you're ready to meet me halfway. Until then, I'm going to keep living." I hung up before she could reply. The phone stayed quiet after that. No follow-up texts, no apologies, just silence. I didn't cry that night. I painted instead. A stormy sky over an empty field, grays and blues bleeding into each other. When I finished, I signed my name in the corner for the first time in my life. Weeks turned into months. Spring arrived. Tulips pushed through the mulch outside my condo. I planted more, pink and yellow ones that reminded me of the garden behind the old Naperville house. I joined a senior hiking group. Easy trails, mostly flat, good company. We talked about grandchildren, about aches and pains, about the kids who call and the ones who don't. I wasn't alone in my story. One afternoon in May, I sat on a park bench after a walk, thermos of tea in hand, watching families picnic nearby. A little girl, no more than 4, ran to her grandmother with arms wide open. The woman scooped her up, laughing, kissing her cheeks. I watched and felt the familiar pang, but it didn't cut as deep. I realized something important that day. I still loved them, deeply, fiercely. But love doesn't mean endless bleeding. It means honoring the person you became while giving everything away and refusing to disappear now that the giving is done. The reckoning wasn't about punishing them, it was about reclaiming me. And for the first time in decades, I liked the woman I saw in the mirror. She had gray at the temples, lines around her eyes from years of smiling through exhaustion, hands rough from work and worry. But she was still here, still standing, still painting her own sky.
The months after that phone call with Leela stretched into a strange, quiet freedom. I didn't wake up anymore checking my phone for messages that never came. I didn't rehearse apologies I wasn't sure I owed. I simply existed in my own life for the first time in 4 decades, and the space felt both terrifying and holy. I started therapy in late spring, not the dramatic, couch lying down kind you see in movies, just a weekly Zoom session with a licensed clinical social worker named Dr. Patel, who practiced out of a small office in Downers Grove. She was in her late 50s, calm voice, no-nonsense eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Our first session, I cried for 20 minutes straight before I could even speak. She didn't rush me. When I finally managed words, they came in a rush. The hospital promise, the endless giving, the empty Thanksgivings, the way my children had rewritten our story so that I was the one who'd failed. Dr. Patel listened without interrupting. Then she asked the question that changed everything. "What if their version isn't the truth?" she said gently. "What if it's just the story that lets them live with the guilt of how little they've given back?" I stared at the screen, stunned. I'd spent so long accepting their narrative, quietly absorbing the blame they never spoke aloud but implied in every missed call, every one-line text, that I hadn't considered there might be another lens. She introduced me to the concept of parental estrangement, a term I'd never heard. She explained how adult children sometimes rewrite history to justify distance. The mother who was always working becomes never there. The sacrifices become obligations. The love becomes smothering. It's a defense mechanism, she said. Easier to blame the parent than to face their own shortcomings. I started reading books with titles like Done with the Crying, Rules of Estrangement, and When Our Grown Kids Disappoint Us, arrived in brown packages at my door. I read them on the couch with a cup of chamomile, highlighter in hand, underlining passages until the pages looked like abstract art. One line burned into me. "You did not raise entitled children. You raised children in a world that rewards entitlement, and you never taught them the price of ingratitude because you were too busy shielding them from every consequence." I cried again, not from hurt this time, but from recognition. I'd protected them so fiercely they never learned what it felt like to lose something important. And now, when the thing they were losing was me, they didn't know how to fight for it. I found a support group online, first, estrangedstories.com, then a local one through the community center. We met every other Thursday in a circle of folding chairs in the multi-purpose room. There were 12 of us that first night, 6 mothers, 3 fathers, a couple of grandparents. Ages ranged from late 40s to mid-70s. We shared coffee from a battered percolator and stories that sounded eerily similar. Marlene, 71, hadn't seen her son in 4 years because she'd asked him to pay back a loan he'd never repaid. She said I was holding money over his head, she told us, voice cracking. I just wanted him to learn responsibility.
Jamal, 54, had his daughter cut him off after he refused to co-sign on a third car loan. She called me selfish after I'd paid for 2 degrees and her wedding. We passed tissues around like communion wafers. No one tried to fix anyone else. We just witnessed. And in that witnessing, the shame I'd carried like a second skin began to loosen. I started living, not waiting, not hoping, but living. I booked a solo trip to coastal Maine in July, 5 days in a small cottage overlooking Acadia National Park. I drove the park loop road at dawn, windows down, salt air in my hair. I hiked easy trails to Thunderhole, sat on granite ledges watching waves crash, ate lobster rolls on a pier while seagulls circled overhead. For the first time in my adult life, no one needed me to be anywhere but where I was. I took selfies, not for anyone else, just for me. I framed one when I got home, me smiling against pink granite, wind tousling my gray-streaked hair. I hung it in the hallway where I'd once displayed the twins' graduation photos. I picked up painting again, really picked it up, not just the community class, but daily practice. I set up an easel in the spare bedroom, covered the floor with drop cloths, bought tubes of cadmium red and ultramarine blue. I painted Lake Michigan at sunset, the old Naperville house in autumn, even abstract pieces, swirls of color that felt like the chaos I'd carried inside for so long, finally released onto canvas. Ruth, my instructor, said my work had found its voice. I believed her. I joined the senior hiking group more regularly. We did the Illinois Prairie Path, the Morton Arboretum trails, sometimes the Des Plaines River Trail when the leaves turned gold. The group was small, 8 or 9 regulars, and we talked as we walked. About everything. About kids who ghosted, about bodies that betrayed us, about the surprising joy of rediscovering hobbies we'd abandoned decades ago. One woman, Claire, 68, had started playing guitar at 65. She brought it on hikes sometimes, played old folk songs at rest stops. I learned The Water is Wide from her and sang it softly to myself on solo walks. Therapy continued. Dr. Patel helped me build boundaries that felt like armor instead of walls. She said, "You can love them and still protect your peace. Those two things are not mutually exclusive." I practiced. When a holiday approached and the old guilt rose like bile, I reminded myself, I am allowed to choose rest. When Leela's baby was born in February and photos flooded social media, tiny Evelyn Rose in a pink blanket, James beaming, Leela glowing, I felt the pang but didn't drown in it. I sent a card and a soft stuffed lamb, wrote, "Welcome, little one, Nana loves you already," and left it at that. No begging for photos, no offering to fly out, just quiet love from a distance. By the end of that year, the ache hadn't vanished. It probably never would, but it had dulled to something manageable, a bruise instead of an open wound. I looked in the mirror one morning and saw a woman who had survived, not just survived, rebuilt. I had gray hair I no longer dyed, laugh lines deeper than before, hands still rough from years of work, but now they held paintbrushes instead of night shift charts. I had a life that belonged to me. And in the quiet spaces where guilt used to live, something new had taken root. Peace. Not the peace of reunion or resolution, the peace of knowing I had given everything once, and now I was giving the rest to myself. That, I realized, was the real truth I'd been searching for. Not that I'd failed as a mother, but that I'd succeeded so completely I'd forgotten how to mother myself. Until now.
2 years had passed since that rain-soaked February phone call when Lila accused me of being selfish. 2 years of mornings that belonged to me, evenings filled with paint and quiet music, weekends on trails with people who asked how I was and actually waited for the answer. I'd turned 70, celebrated with a solo trip to the Smoky Mountains, hiking easy paths, reading on a porch swing, eating peach cobbler at a roadside diner without once checking my phone for messages that never came. I'd learned to live without the constant ache of waiting. Then, on a crisp October afternoon in 2025, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text, a real envelope, cream-colored, my name handwritten in Lila's familiar looping script. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once fed 2 toddlers applesauce, and opened it slowly. "Mom," it began, "I'm sorry. I don't even know where to start, but I need to try. Evelyn is 2 now, and every time she asks about Nana, because that's what James calls you in the bedtime stories he reads her, I feel like the worst person alive. I've spent the last 2 years telling myself you were the one who pulled away, that you were punishing us, that we were just busy with real life. But the truth is, we took you for granted. We treated your love like it was air, always there, never something we had to earn or think. I see it now. I see how much I hurt you. Ethan sees it too. We talked, really talked for the first time in years. We cried. A lot. We're not asking for forgiveness right away. We know we don't deserve it yet. But if you're willing, we'd like to try. Coffee? Neutral ground. No pressure. Just us. Evelyn would love to meet you. She has your eyes. Love, and I mean it this time, Lila. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it on the table like something fragile. My hands shook, not from anger, but from the sudden rush of everything I'd carefully boxed away. Ethan called 3 days later. His voice cracked on the first "Mom." He didn't make excuses. He apologized, raw, stumbling words about being selfish, about chasing success so hard he forgot the people who'd given him the runway to chase it. "I thought you'd always be there," he said. "I didn't realize always could run out if I didn't hold up my end." We talked for an hour. No fixing, no rushing, just listening. I didn't say yes immediately. I told them I needed time. They respected it. No pressure, no guilt trips. That alone felt like progress. A month later, I agreed to coffee, a small cafe in downtown Naperville. Neutral, public, easy to leave if it felt wrong. I arrived early, ordered herbal tea, sat by the window watching leaves skitter across the sidewalk. My heart hammered like I was on a first date. They walked in together. Lila first, hair shorter now, eyes tired but bright. Ethan behind her, taller than I remembered, lines around his mouth from smiling too much at investors. And then Evelyn, tiny, curly-haired, clutching a stuffed lamb that looked suspiciously like the one I'd sent when she was born. Lila's eyes filled the second she saw me. Ethan swallowed hard. Evelyn stared at me with wide, curious eyes. My eyes, just like the letter said. We sat, ordered more coffee, talked. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, tears, half-formed apologies that trailed off. I told them the truth. I'd spent decades giving until I had nothing left, then spent 2 years learning I was allowed to keep something for myself. I told them I loved them, always would, but I wouldn't go back to being the endless well they dipped into without refilling. They listened, really listened. Lila cried when I described the empty Thanksgivings. Ethan looked down at his hands when I talked about the hip surgery, the unpaid bills, the nights I'd wondered if I raised them right. I didn't know, or maybe I didn't want to know. Ethan nodded. We rewrote the story so we didn't have to feel bad. That stops now. We didn't hug right away. We didn't promise everything would be fixed. But when Evelyn reached across the table with chubby fingers and said, "Nana," in that sweet toddler voice, I lifted her into my lap. She smelled like baby shampoo and graham crackers. She patted my cheek and said, "Pretty." I cried then. Quiet, grateful tears. They visit now. Not every weekend, not even every month. But when they do, it's real. No performative holiday dinners, no forced cheer. Just coffee on the porch, walks around the neighborhood, Evelyn chasing leaves while we talk about ordinary things, her preschool, Ethan's latest project, Lila's freelance work. Sometimes they bring takeout, sometimes I cook. We laugh about old stories, the time Ethan glued his hand to the table during a science experiment, the night Lila tried to dye her hair purple and ended up with a streak that lasted 6 months. I still have boundaries. I say no when I need to. I don't drop everything when they call. I keep painting, keep hiking, keep my therapy appointments. I've started a small Etsy shop for my watercolors. Nothing big, just enough to buy better supplies and feel like an artist instead of just a retired nurse. Some days the old ache returns. a holiday photo on social media without me in it, a missed birthday call, but it doesn't gut me anymore. It's a reminder, not a wound. I look at Evelyn, my granddaughter with my eyes and her mother's laugh, and I remember the promise I made in that hospital room so long ago. I protected them. I gave them everything, and in doing so, I taught them the world could be kind, safe, full of second chances. Now I'm teaching them something new, that a mother's love isn't infinite in the way they once thought. It has shape, edges, a self that needs tending, and that's okay. Because the painful truth I learned isn't that loyalty and sacrifice are wasted, it's that they're gifts, precious, costly, and never to be taken for granted. I still love them fiercely, but I love myself too, and that, I've come to understand, is what it really means to be a mother, to give everything you have, then find the courage to take back enough to keep living. Some days I sit on my porch at sunset, Evelyn napping inside, Lila and Ethan talking quietly in the kitchen, and I think, I survived. I rebuilt. I forgave. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. And that's the greatest gift I ever gave my children. Not the endless giving, but the example that a woman can pour out her whole heart and still choose to fill it again. For herself. For whatever years remain. For the quiet, hard-won peace that comes after the storm.